The moment Eliza Montgomery stood on Marcus Wilson's doorstep in her designer wedding dress, mascara streaking down her face, was the moment both their lives changed forever. She hadn't planned to end up there, certainly not on what was supposed to be her wedding day, but something had broken inside her as she stared at her reflection in the bridal suite. 3 hours later, she was facing the bewildered employee she'd barely spoken to, clutching a bouquet that was beginning to wilt, just like her carefully constructed life. If you're touched by stories of unexpected love and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming real-life stories that remind us what truly matters. Marcus Wilson had been struggling to keep his head above water. At 34, he found himself a single father to 7-year-old Lily after his wife abandoned them 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a hastily written note on the kitchen counter. He worked as a mid-level marketing executive at Montgomery Industries, where he kept to himself, did his job well, and left promptly at 5 to pick up his daughter from after-school care. His colleagues knew him as quiet, competent, and completely closed off. Eliza Montgomery was the opposite. As CEO of Montgomery Industries, the company her grandfather had built from nothing, she was known for her razor-sharp business acumen, impeccable style, and the kind of confidence that came from never having failed at anything important. At 36, she was engaged to Richard Harrington, heir to a banking fortune and the perfect match on paper. Their wedding had been featured in Society magazines months before it was scheduled to happen, a merger of two powerful families that made perfect sense to everyone. Everyone except Eliza's heart. "I'm sorry," she said, standing on Marcus's porch, her voice barely audible over the sound of rain hitting her veil. "I didn't know where else to go." Marcus stood frozen, his daughter peeking out from behind his legs. "Ms. Montgomery? What's happening? Are you okay?" The rain had soaked through her gown, and she looked nothing like the intimidating executive who strode through the office in designer suits and heels that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. She looked lost, vulnerable, and strangely beautiful. "I couldn't do it," she whispered. "I couldn't fake loving him anymore." The story of how Eliza Montgomery ended up on Marcus Wilson's doorstep began 6 months earlier, though neither of them realized it at the time. It was during the company's annual charity gala, an event Eliza usually navigated with practiced ease, moving from one important conversation to another, securing donations and strengthening business relationships. That night, however, she had found herself momentarily alone on the balcony, needing a break from the performance. She didn't notice Marcus in the shadows, also seeking refuge from the crowd, until she heard a quiet voice. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" She turned, startled, to find one of her employees, she wasn't sure from which department, standing respectfully at a distance. "I'm sorry, Ms. Montgomery. I didn't mean to disturb you. I leave you alone." "No," she'd said, surprising herself. "Stay. It is a beautiful night." They'd talked for 15 minutes about nothing important, the stars, the city lights, the success of the gala. He hadn't tried to impress her or pitch an idea or compliment her excessively. He'd just been genuine, and for 15 minutes, she'd felt like a person instead of a position. The next day, she'd looked him up in the company directory. Marcus Wilson, Marketing Department, divorced, 1 child. She'd meant to thank him for the conversation, but the moment never seemed right. Their paths rarely crossed naturally, and creating an opportunity would have seemed strange. So she'd filed the memory away, occasionally thinking of that peaceful conversation when board meetings became particularly contentious. What she didn't know was that Marcus had gone home that night and told his daughter about the real person he'd discovered hiding inside their intimidating CEO. Lily had been fascinated, asking questions about the queen of the company that made Marcus laugh. It became their little secret, that Ms. Montgomery wasn't just a stern face on the company newsletter but someone who loved looking at stars and spoke softly when she thought no one important was listening. The wedding plans had progressed, with Eliza going through the motions. The perfect venue, the perfect dress, the perfect fiancé who looked good in photos and knew exactly which fork to use at dinner. Richard was handsome, successful, and completely wrong for her, a fact she acknowledged only in the darkest hours of the night when she couldn't sleep. 3 days before the wedding, Eliza had been working late, reviewing contracts that couldn't wait until after her honeymoon. The office was nearly empty when she decided to take a break and walk around the floor, stretching her legs. That's when she'd heard a child's laughter coming from one of the cubicles. Curious, she'd followed the sound to find Marcus sitting at his desk with a young girl perched on his knee. They were looking at something on his computer screen, and the girl was giggling uncontrollably. "Daddy, do it again. Make the monkey dance again." Marcus had obliged, clicking something that made the girl dissolve into another fit of giggles. The sound was so pure, so joyful, that Eliza found herself smiling. Working late, M.A.R. Wilson, she'd asked, causing both father and daughter to jump. M.A.S. Montgomery. I'm so sorry. The babysitter cancelled last minute, and I had to finish this presentation for tomorrow. I promise it won't happen again. Is this your daughter? Elisa had asked, ignoring his apology. Yes, this is Lily. Lily, say hello to M.S. Montgomery. She's Daddy's boss. The little girl had studied Eliza with solemn eyes before breaking into a smile. You're the star lady. Daddy told me about you. Marcus had looked mortified, but Eliza had been intrigued. The star lady? From the balcony, Marcus had explained quickly. I mentioned to Lily that we had a conversation at the gala. About the stars. I see, Eliza had said, feeling strangely touched that he'd mentioned their brief encounter to his daughter. Well, it's very nice to meet you, Lily. I like your hair ribbons. Thank you. Daddy did them. He's not very good at it, but he tries really hard. The honesty had made Eliza laugh, a genuine laugh that she realized she hadn't experienced in months. That's what matters, isn't it? Trying hard for the people we care about. She'd left them shortly after, but the image of father and daughter had stayed with her. The way Marcus looked at Lily, with such open love and devotion, was nothing like the calculated affection Richard showed her. It had planted a seed of doubt that grew rapidly over the next 2 days. The morning of her wedding, surrounded by bridesmaids she barely knew and her mother fussing over every detail, Eliza had looked at herself in the mirror and seen a stranger. The woman staring back at her was about to marry a man she didn't love, to please people who didn't really know her, to maintain an image that felt increasingly hollow. I can't do this, she'd whispered, causing her mother to rush over. What was that, darling? Is something wrong with the dress? No, mother. Everything's wrong with me. I don't love him. The chaos that followed had been spectacular. Her mother's hysterics, her father's cold fury, Richard's stunned disbelief quickly turning to calculation as he considered the business implications. Eliza had walked out of the church's bridal suite, ignoring the calls of the wedding planner and the shocked gasps of early arriving guests. She'd gotten into her car, not the decorated limousine waiting to take her to the ceremony, but her own car that she'd insisted on having brought to the church, and driven aimlessly for hours. When the rain started, it had seemed fitting. A cleansing. A baptism into a new life where she would stop pretending. And somehow, without conscious decision, she'd found herself in front of Marcus Wilson's modest suburban home, drawn to the only person who had recently made her feel like herself. Now, standing on his porch, she realized how insane this looked. I'm sorry, she said again, turning to leave. This was a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. Wait, Marcus said, reaching out but stopping short of touching her. You're soaking wet and upset. At least come inside until the rain stops. Lily tugged on her father's hand. Daddy, the star lady is sad. We should give her hot chocolate. That's what you give me when I'm sad. The simple kindness broke something in Eliza, and she found herself crying in earnest, not the dignified tears she'd allowed herself earlier, but deep, body-shaking sobs that released years of suppressed emotion. Marcus ushered her inside, sending Lily to get a towel while he made hot chocolate. His home was nothing like the sleek penthouse she shared with Richard. It was modest but warm, with mismatched furniture and children's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. It felt like a home, not a showcase. I left him at the altar, she said when she could speak again, clutching the mug of hot chocolate. 300 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and a 5-tier cake, and I just walked away. Why did you come here? Marcus asked gently, keeping a respectful distance on the couch. Elisa looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Richard, but his face was kind, with laugh lines around his eyes and a steadiness that felt reassuring. Because you're real, she said finally. That night on the balcony, and then seeing you with Lily, you're not pretending to be someone you're not. I've been pretending for so long I'm not sure I know who I am anymore. Lily, who had been quietly coloring at the coffee table, looked up. I know who you are. You're the star lady who runs Daddy's company and has pretty eyes. Elisa smiled through her tears. Thank you, Lily. That's very sweet. Are you going to marry someone else now? Lily asked with a child's directness. Lily. Marcus admonished gently. That's not an appropriate question. It's okay, Eliza said. No, Lily, I'm not going to marry anyone for a while. You think I need to figure out who I am first? That makes sense, Lily nodded sagely. Daddy says you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else. That's why he doesn't date. Is still working on the first part. Marcus looked mortified, but Eliza found herself laughing, a watery laugh, but genuine. Your daddy is very wise. The rain continued through the evening, and somehow Eliza stayed. Marcus ordered pizza, and they ate it in the living room while Lily regaled them with stories about her second-grade class. It was the most normal evening Eliza had experienced in years, and she found herself relaxing in a way she never did at the charity galas and business dinners that filled her social calendar. When Lily went to bed, Marcus and Eliza talked. Really talked, about things that mattered. He told her about his ex-wife's departure and the struggle to rebuild his life as a single parent. She told him about the pressure of taking over the family business at 28 when her father had a heart attack, and how she'd been trying to prove herself ever since. I admire you, he said, surprising her. Not just as my boss, but as a person. Jube handled tremendous responsibility with grace. Grace, she repeated, gesturing to her bedraggled wedding dress. I'm sitting in your living room in a ruined Verowang after leaving my fiancé at the altar. This is the opposite of grace. No, he said firmly. This is courage. It takes more courage to walk away from something wrong than to go through with it because it's expected. When the rain finally stopped around midnight, Eliza reluctantly stood to leave. Thank you, she said. For not turning me away. For the hot chocolate and the conversation. Anytime, he said, and she believed him. The fallout from Eliza's decision was as severe as she'd expected. Richard's family pulled their investments from Montgomery Industries, causing a temporary but significant drop in stock prices. The society pages had a field day with headlines about the runaway CEO bride. Her parents refused to speak to her for weeks. But professionally, she stood her ground. She called an emergency board meeting and laid out a strategy to stabilize the company without the Harrington investments. She worked harder than ever, proving that her personal choices hadn't affected her business acumen. And she made another change. She started walking the floors of her company regularly, learning names, asking questions, creating an atmosphere where people felt seen and valued. The company culture slowly shifted, becoming less hierarchical and more collaborative. She didn't seek out Marcus specifically, that would have been inappropriate given their positions, but their paths crossed naturally now that she was more present in the day-to-day operations. Each interaction was professional but warm, building a foundation of mutual respect. 3 months after the non-wedding, Eliza instituted a new company policy allowing employees to bring their children to work when childcare fell through. She had a small play area created in an unused conference room, stocked with books and quiet activities. When asked about the change at a staff meeting, she simply said, "We're a family-friendly company, and we should support our employees who are parents." Marcus knew the policy was at least partly inspired by his late-night work session with Lily, but he never mentioned it. Instead, he threw himself into a marketing campaign for the company's new charitable foundation, creating materials that highlighted the human impact of their corporate giving. The campaign caught Eliza's attention, and she called him to her office to discuss expanding it. Their meeting was strictly professional, but there was an undercurrent of awareness between them, a shared secret of that rainy night when she'd shown up at his door. "This is excellent work, Mr. Wilson," she said, reviewing his presentation. "You've captured exactly what we're trying to achieve." "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I believe in what we're doing." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in heading up the foundation's marketing department? It would be a promotion, with more responsibility but also more flexibility in your schedule." For Lily, he realized. That would be incredible. "Thank you for considering me." "You earned it," she said simply. "Your work speaks for itself." As the months passed, Marcus thrived in his new role, and Eliza continued to transform the company culture. They maintained a professional relationship at work, but occasionally Eliza would ask about Lily, and Marcus would share a story that made her smile. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, Montgomery Industries hosted a family picnic for employees and their children. Elisa had never attended these events before, always finding an excuse to make a brief appearance and then leave. This time, she stayed the entire day, rolling up the sleeves of her casual blouse and participating in the three-legged race with the head of accounting's teenage daughter. Marcus watched her from a distance, impressed by the transformation. The intimidating CEO was still a formidable businesswoman, but she had found a way to be human at the same time. Lily had no such reservations about maintaining distance and ran straight up to Eliza with a flower crown she'd made at the crafts table. M.A.S. Montgomery. He made this for you because you're like a queen, but the nice kind from the good stories. Eliza knelt down to Lily's level, accepting the slightly crushed daisy chain. Thank you, Lily. This is the most beautiful crown I've ever received. She placed it on her head, not caring that several board members were watching with raised eyebrows. Lily beamed and then asked the question that had been brewing in her 7-year-old mind for months. Do you like my daddy? Because he likes you. He smiles different when he talks about you. Marcus, who had been hurrying across the lawn to intercept his daughter, froze in mortification. Eliza looked up, meeting his panicked gaze with a surprisingly calm one of her own. Your daddy is one of my favorite people, she told Lily honestly. He's kind and smart and takes very good care of you, which I think is the most important job in the world. Lily considered this. So you do like him? Yes, Eliza said, still looking at Marcus. I do like him. The admission hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Later, after the picnic was over and most families had gone home, they found themselves sitting at an empty table while Lily played with the last few children on the playground. I'm sorry about what Lily said, Marcus began. Kids have no filter. Don't apologize, Eliza said. I meant what I said. I do like you, Marcus. More than is probably appropriate given our professional relationship. He looked at her, surprised by her candor. I like you too. Abby sensed that night on the balcony. What do we do about that, she asked, the powerful CEO suddenly uncertain. I don't know, he admitted. It's